Okay, so now moving on to number two. Number two, this one may be a bit of a strange one, but this one I personally think is one of the most criminally overlooked animes of all time. And if, like me, you're a fan of wrestling, then you will definitely get a kick out of this show. Number two is Ultimate Muscle, or as it's also known, the Kinnikuman Legacy.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Okay. Well, this one's a sequel series to, I think it was called Kinnikuman, the original series. It was back in the 80s, and it's a wrestling-themed anime based around a group of alien wrestlers. And basically, this series carries on from, like, I guess you could say the second generation of these wrestlers. There's, like, two companies in this one. There's, like, the Muscle League, which is pretty much WWE. Their enemies are the DNP, which is like a reference to the NWO, or I think actually they may have been based on the staple Bullet Club as well, which was like quite a big wrestling staple in Japan, and actually are still going today, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, the main character in this is a character called, I think in the anime he's called Montaro Kinnikuman, but in the English dub he's called Kid Muscle, and he's the son of King Muscle, or Kinnikuman, who was like the original character in the TV series.
Oh, okay.
Now, I have to say, Kid Muscle for me is actually one of the more unique characters in, I guess you could say, like a shonen anime, because I think it's fair to say in a lot of these sort of animes, the main characters tend to be quite heroic, quite brave, and kind of idealized and somewhat naive.
Yeah.
Kid Muscle is kind of the exact opposite. He's extremely cowardly, he's totally selfish, and to be fair, in fighting, he's actually pretty useless. So that's kind of like a totally different hero to what you normally get, but it actually kind of makes the show a bit more watchable because, you know, it's kind of refreshing to not have a character give like a heroic speech every 5 seconds about how he'll do the right thing and he'll defeat the bad guys and stuff
and
like that.
never give up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there is some bits of that because, you know, occasionally Kid Muscle will pull his socks up and get into a fight, and but he's also got like this I guess you could say Super Saiyan ability where he can like level up to like become a lot stronger, and but yeah. I thought he's quite. Oh, yeah, and he pisses himself in the ring as well.
You got me again in the middle of a drink.
Yeah. Yeah, if you like body fluid humor, then you'll probably love this because he's a big fan of fart jokes and pissing jokes in this one. Which
sounds like my guy friends.
And funny enough, this is a bit of an interesting thing for you. The English dub was actually dubbed by 4Kids. And for those of you who've ever seen any 4Kids show, you know that they generally like to localize and censor quite a lot of things in their animes. It's amazing how much they actually let slip through in this one. I'll get to that in just a minute. But the fact they even let the farting and pissing going in. And, oh, yes, there's also one bit where Kid Muscle leaves a quote-unquote stink bug in the ring. Which obviously is a bit of talking poop. But yeah, how that made it past the censors, I have no idea. There was a plot-based reason for him doing it, but basically the enemy he was going across was like a giant shoe.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, that's one thing I love about the characters in this, because like the characters, like all the alien wrestlers, are like some of the most ridiculous you're ever going to see. Like I mentioned, like the talking shoe is called the Pumpinator, and his special ability is basically he's like a talking plimsoll. Then there was a monster in it called Monsieur French, who was a talking frog, because that's not racist in any way at all.
Of course not.
Yes, and then there was also another character called Mr. Cheeks, who was a walking pair of buttocks. May I just remind you again, this was dubbed by 4Kids of all people.
That's really shocking.
Yeah. But anyway, hands down, my favourite character in this entire series, and actually quite a lot of the characters are like based on, or named after famous wrestlers or referencing other wrestlers, like the leader of the Muscle League is called Vance McMahon, which is obviously a reference to Vince McMahon. The main, I guess you could say, anti-hero / villain of the group is a guy called Kevin Mask, who was, I think, named after Kevin Nash. For those of you who know wrestling, he played Diesel in WWE, and interestingly enough, he also played Super Shredder in the second Turtles film.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But in the context of this one, he's a son of the English wrestler Robin Mask, and originally he starts off in the DMP, but then he kind of breaks off his own, and he becomes sort of like the loner anti-hero of the group.
Oh.
But I tell you what, though, coming back to how 4Kids censored out a lot of things, they really probably should have done a bit more with Kevin Mask, because in the third series, where they do like the or the third arc, I should say, they do like this thing called the Chojin tournaments, where they try to find out who the best wrestler is, and Kevin Mask kind of goes like a journey of self-discovery, where he actually becomes a bit of a ruthless son of a gun. I mean, there's one match where he actually straight up murders his opponent.
Oh dear.
He rips a guy's arm off.
Ugh.
Yeah, and there's another bit where he even breaks Kid Muscle's shoulders, and they have to pluck him back into space. There's even another bit where there's a wrestler called Checkmate. He actually breaks his legs, and you can actually see the damage it's done, and then he twists them back into space. I mean, it's actually pretty gruesome, and I was quite surprised that 4Kids, they were normally quite tough with their censorship, they kind of let this one go a little bit, but I'm kind of glad that they didn't, because it kind of makes that show a bit more dark, but, you know, I was quite surprised how much they get away with.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, ironically, this is the strange, because, again, spoiler, the final battle, it gets through the Kevin Mask and Kid Muscle in the final battle. But the thing is, even though Kevin Mask is actually technically the villain, I actually wanted him to win the final battle, because, you know, up until then, Kid Muscle, he's basically won every single match by pulling a miracle out of his ass or something like that. But Kevin Mask, he generally, I mean, for all his darkness, he generally works his way up the ladder to, like, beat all the bad guys. And everything he does on his own. He doesn't rely on it. It kind of feels like they cheated him out of it in the final. I mean, Kevin Mask is the villain, and they're supposed to have villains lose, but I don't know. I think it would have been a bit better if he won it, to be perfectly honest. But hey, that's me.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I actually say this is one of the most underrated animes out there, and like I say, if you enjoy wrestling, then you'll probably enjoy this. I know Hulk Hogan is quite a big fan of the original Kinnikuman series, so we'll probably like this. Oh, here's an interesting bit of trivia for you. Believe it or not, this series actually inspired a real wrestling move.
Really?
Yep. Because in the series, the Kinnikuman family got this special move called the Kinniku Buster. And it's basically when they throw their opponent into the air, grab them, and they hold them upside down. And as they come down, their neck compresses against their shoulder and ends up doing a lot of damage to them. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a wrestler called Samoa Joe who actually has this as his finishing move. Obviously, not as dangerous as that, but I remember I went to like a wrestling show one time where Samoa Joe was wrestling, and he set up his opponent for like it's called the Muscle Buster in the wrestling terms. But I actually shout out from the crowd, "Kinniku Buster!" And actually, the guy in front of me was saying that he turned around, he had like the biggest smile on his face. I was like, "Oh, dude, that's awesome!" And I was like, "Yes, another Kinnikuman fan!" So that was pretty cool.
It's always fun to meet other fans.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Well then, anything else you want to say to that before I move on to my number one? Because I can talk for quite a while on this one, on my number one, guys. So I hope you strap yourself in tightly, because
I'm learning quite a bit. I mean, I'm usually not into fighting style shows, but I'm always interested, especially with something for 4Kids. That's really interesting, because other than Pokemon, they really water down the original content. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, excellent.
So, yeah, but I am looking forward to your number one.
Okay, right now, I mentioned earlier that I generally try to stay away from like the more popular sort of animes, and this anime here does fall into, I guess you could say, one of like the big animes. But if I'm being brutally honest, I love this anime. You know, for me, this is as close to a perfect anime in every possible way. So, the big reveal, my number one favorite anime is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Big Mignana. Love him.
Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is, without question, my absolute favorite anime of all time. It has a story that has you hooked on episode 1. The characters are quite surprisingly complex for a shonen anime. It has some really deeply emotional themes and some quite actually intelligent storylines. And actually, I'd probably say the music, the opening and ending of the episodes, are some of the best I've heard in any anime, but that's just my opinion. Sorry, quick synopsis for those that haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen this anime yet, then shame on you. So it's basically set in like an alternative Edwardian era history, and it focuses on two brothers, and they created what's called the ultimate taboo. Without going too much into explanation, alchemy just basically think magic mixed in with science. I mean, it's obviously a bit more complicated than that, but I think that'll be a video in itself.
But there is a price.
Absolutely, yes. And with alchemy, they have what's called equivalent exchange, in which case they have to give something of equal value. But they created the ultimate taboo, which is to bring their dead mother back to life. And as such, Ed lost his arm and his leg, and his brother lost his entire body and was forged to a suit of armor. So they're now working for King Bradley's government, and they're like state alchemists. And the overall plot of it is they work for the military, but at the same time they're trying to get his body back and his arms and legs. But throughout the course of the story, they become involved in like a conspiracy involving homunculi, corruption, and something much darker, much deeper. So it has some really deep themes throughout. What I really love about it is, especially like the alchemy sort of side of things, is it doesn't go into great detail explaining what alchemy is. It kind of more like gives you a regular hint, leaves you to make your own mind up. But that I think is quite good, because I think too much anime, I think they tend to sometimes go into too much explanation as to how their abilities works and stuff like that. Whereas alchemy, it gives you just enough to not slow down the story, but at the same time doesn't entirely tell you everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like being a writer. You want to give them enough to go on the right path, but you don't want to hold their hand.
Sure, absolutely. And this is also quite good because the Full Metal Alchemist, the whole idea of alchemy is, as we mentioned, like the whole idea of equivalent exchange, so that you can't create something from nothing. You just have to create something like using of equal value. But there's also like another side of it called alchemy, and I think it's kind of hinted that alchemy and alchemy are one and the same sort of thing. But I don't really want to get into too much detail because I'll probably ruin like the fun of it. But now moving on to the story of Fullmetal Alchemist. Like I said, this story for me is absolutely perfect. It's one of those stories that I think generally, like when I see an anime, it's like normally sometimes I think the story gets a bit too convoluted and I lose interest in it after a while. Not the case with this one because there's always something fresh in every episode, something that keeps you going. And luckily, the plot isn't too overly complicated. And if you do get lost, it does keep you up on track, but it doesn't like throw like a lot of flashbacks to try and explain everything and throw it in your face. That's one thing that annoys about anime. They're always like too heavily reliant on flashbacks to keep reminding you what's happening. But luckily, there's not too much of that in Fullmetal Alchemist. Or if there is, it's just the right amount. But and there are some flashback episodes, but thankfully, I think they actually do add to the story rather than detract from them. And for me personally, not one episode felt like a filler episode. It was because everything just came together just so well, especially at the end. It's just perfect. Now, what I also love about this show is the collection of really strong female leads. Because I mean, I'm not saying that anime is devoid of female leads, but I think especially in Fullmetal Alchemist, they have some like the strongest female characters I've ever seen in an anime. So in quite the literal sense. I mean, you've got the character of Winry, who's just like one of the most lovable heroines ever. Oh, I love Winry. And the talks that she and Ed have together are just like, oh, they're just so cute. You have Azumi, their teacher, who is probably one of my favourite characters of all time because she's like your strict teacher sort of role, but she's actually, I think she is like a mothering sort of character in her own way. And I love how she keeps, even though she says that she's a housewife, she can really kick ass. Then you got Riza Hawkeye, who's like a strong military soldier that seems to it, but does protect those she cares about. And then there's Olivia Armstrong. Oh, she is just, well,
she's awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's just say if she can take down her brother, then you know how tough she is. So that's pretty cool.
I love Armstrong.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The sparkle.
He's probably one of the few. Yeah, he's actually probably one of the few characters in anime I think that can sparkle, yet still somehow seem manly. It's brilliant.
This manly tears of joy, the brotherly love. I love
that. Yeah. What I do like about this show is I mentioned the characters being surprisingly complex because it's kind of like sometimes characters will do things that you don't quite expect, but it never feels out of place for them. Like I think Roy Mustang's quite a bit of an example because yeah, he wants to overthrow King Bradley, which is the right thing to do, but then there's quite a few times where you think, is he doing it for the right reasons? Because obviously he desires power and he wants to like rule. So you have to kind of ask yourself, is he doing it for the right reasons? But and even with the homunculi, most of the homunculi I absolutely despise. But there's the homunculi Greed, who's actually quite an interesting character because it's like he claims not to have any emotions, but if you actually think about it, he actually does. I mean, Greed, his main desire, actually kind of makes him protective of those that he collects. So that's some interesting character developments in that. And again, going back to Olivia Armstrong, she's I mean, she's a tough leader, but at the same time, I love the fact that she doesn't discriminate against anyone. She treats everyone as equals, so that's really good. Also, I have to say, this Varling's character Scar, what they do with his character, I think is absolute genius. Because when he first appears, he appears as sort of like a serial killer, kidnapped state alchemist. They kind of make him out to be like an absolute evil murderer. But then you learn his backstory and actually find out why he's doing what he's doing. You actually realise that maybe he's actually not a villain. He's also a revenge-seeking guy, but he's not. He actually does have some really good sides to him, and you know. But yeah, he fights the Ulrich brothers quite a bit, and he has a connection with Winry, which I won't go into. But for the record, the scenes with Winry and him are some of the most emotional and heartbreaking I've seen in any sort of anime. So I actually really warmed to Scar quite quickly because I think once I understand where he came from, I did see why he was doing all those killings. And I also really like how the whole story of Alchemist has like an underlining theme of sort of an anti-war statement, because one of the running themes is basically there was this war between Ishval and the Emestrians, which has a lot of references with the Gulf War, I think, and I think it's actually plays on a lot of even today, like a modern of social prejudices and stuff like. Because Ishvalans are obviously looked at by the Emestrians as the villains, and at the same time, this violent, see the Emestrians as like the big enemy that came and took their lands. So it's really clever how they work around that and gives like a strong anti-war statement for that. One final thing I will just say about it is this anime has some of the biggest feels I've ever seen. And if you love your feels, then you should definitely check this one out. Some example include Maze Hughes' death. I'm still trying to get over that one. And even like Sho Tucker turning his child into like a chimera. That's still, I still get chills every time I see that.
Hey, can I have a confession?
Yeah.
I have seen the not Brotherhood, but the original show, and that's episode 7, the one you're referring to. And I couldn't watch it after that. I had just nightmares and just the horribleness of that you do that to your child. It literally scarred me.
it scarred me, and even actually when I read it in the manga, that I was absolutely horrified. And I mentioned this on my blog when I did like a top 5 worst parents. And the fact that he shows absolutely no emotion for doing it, and he literally just sees his children as nothing more than like science experiments, and that is just horrific. But and finally, I've also mentioned that the music is really, really good in this, like especially the intro and outro music. I don't know what it is, but it's like Series 5. The outro music in that, it kind of brings me to tears every time I hear it. I don't know what it is, because I don't necessarily know what they're saying, but I think it kind of captures the emotion of like all the characters. And bear in mind, you are in the last series, so you know it's coming near the end. So there is like a certain sort of emotion behind it, but it's like yeah. Anyway, I probably talked it for way too long. I did warn you I talked for longer. But yeah. Yeah, that's my number 1, Fullmetal Alchemist. If there's anything you can take away from this, is that man is not allowed to play God, or shouldn't play God, or indeed not play around with things that you shouldn't understand. So that's my top 5 animes of all time, and yeah, not much more to say about that. Bit of a strange list, I'll admit, but I don't know. I quite like these ones. They're quite special to me, and just like I'm sure the animes that Morgan will go with will be special to her. But anyway, we shall have that video for you hopefully next week, all being well. Morgan, are you able to give us a little hint as to what we might expect?
Well, there's not a lot of pizza in mine, so and I don't have a lot of bloody violent animes, but I've got a few that might surprise you. Ooh. So
I'm looking forward to it already. Okay, guys. Well, as always, thank you for watching the video. Please make sure to subscribe, share, and like this video, and we will hopefully have the next top 5 for you next week. So I think that's about it for this video. So it just leaves me to say goodbye from me.
And sayonara from Morgan.
We'll see you in the next video, guys. Have a good week. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Yeah.